Hello and welcome to Beyond the Index, a 5-part series designed to be your strategic compass in today's fast-moving B2B world. The series is powered by Dentsu's latest Superpowers Index and is our 5th iteration and the largest study of B2B buying behavior with insights from more than 16,000 B2B buyers and 35,000 different buyer experiences. In Beyond the Index, we dive deeper into the key topics with experts in the industry across business leaders and specialists in their fields. So let's get started. I'm Jake. I'm the EVP of Strategy and Growth for Dentsu B2B. And as AI is something that's been talked about endlessly for the last few years, we're now really coming into the era where it's focused on an AI-powered buyer. It's critical that marketers understand exactly how and why and where to leverage AI to give their B2B brands that winning edge. So today's topic is just about that. And I'm delighted to be joined by two very well-respected marketers in their fields, Lexie and Cameron. If you would like to introduce yourselves.
Yes, of course. I'm Lexie Walker. I'm Regional Marketing Director for Thomson Reuters. I have over 20 years experience working with B2B marketing in industries as education, not-for-profit, corporate, finance.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
Thanks, Jake. Hi, I'm Cameron Partridge. I'm currently Chief Growth Officer for Humanforce, which is a SaaS company focused on human capital management for frontline workers worldwide. Prior to that, I spent a decade in the US working for various different companies, of which one of them was a company called Invisible Technologies, which is one of the world's leading AI training companies. One of the companies that the likes of OpenAI and Meta and Google would lean on to ensure that their models are doing what they're meant to do.
This year's Superpowers focuses on what we're calling the AI-powered buyer and looking at the transformations and the opportunity for new value and working processes. So until now, understanding why and how buyers are using AI in the buying journey was a bit vague and hadn't really existed. So for the first time, we've really dug into this in our Superpowers Index, and we're here exploring why buyers are leveraging AI to make the decisions and where they're actually finding those pockets of value. Nearly 80% of buyers, and it's no surprise on this, they actually say that they're using AI in their purchase journey at some point, researching options, validating vendors, shaping the shortlists before they even talk to a salesperson. And there's a lot of chatter about how AI is changing the buyer journey. I don't necessarily agree with this wholly, as journeys have always been quite messy, but I do think new touch points are being added as we go. But what's clear is that buyer autonomy has lifted, and buyers can research more and validate their options more and form their opinions earlier without actually ever engaging a brand directly. So, long-winded way of saying, my question is, Lexie, from your perspective, how has AI actually changed buyer behaviors, and is it just amplifying what buyers were already doing?
Yes. So, oh my goodness, it's such a deep question. So I'd probably start with, you've got to separate the buyers, right? When AI came into the picture, and we're not talking about, 2 years ago when ChatGPT came on the scene. We're talking about organizations that have been running learning language models throughout all of their automation. And if you think back to maybe 6 or 7 years ago, you saw a movement with procurement. So many big ticket multinational corporations and enterprises started to implement more automation in the way that they procured goods in their companies. So with that instance, I think that was kind of the top tier impact of the way a buyer would look for things. You were no longer completing RFPs from a B2B perspective and dealing with a procurement company and then having the product sold and being accepted at a specific price with procurement. What wound up happening was procurement said, no, this is the way we want it to be done, and it was all done through a system. That's even more enhanced today. So if you are any type of marketer, unfortunately for you, you're dealing with a sales cycle and helping your sales leaders try to penetrate this. And it's always going to be based on content and all of those elements. So you've got a smarter buyer in terms of enterprise, you've got a system that you're working against, and more importantly, if you don't have the right content, you can't break through. When you're thinking about a B2C model, that's a completely different kettle of fish. Your procurement person is not a department, it's the phone, it's the device, right? You've got iPhones or Androids that are pretty much using a lot of geo-tracking to help buyers determine, hey, when you're shopping today, this is the best place to go. That was happening long before the likes of, Gemini or Siri came into the picture. And so now you've got more and more buyers who are asking questions, using voice to text to get that So they're no longer looking at ads, or they're no longer looking at promos to kind of get what they're looking for. At the end of the day, they're just being dictated to by this particular AI program. So I think that the buyer in and of itself is completely different, completely difficult to access as well. And as a result of that, hence you have this new outcome and this new world order on how we need to market to them.
Okay, Cameron, obviously your experience. I'd be interested to know if you sort of agree with that or disagree with it.
Don't disagree.
I'm assuming it's more in agreement. I guess it's kind of like part of that question is that if buyers are doing more work independently and AI is part of that process, what does that mean for brands when they do show up in that journey that Lexie was talking about? And for me, does AI actually really change the information that they're looking at? Or how they find it, or is it just the speed of which they're doing it?
Yeah, I think it's multiple things. I think we can sometimes get really caught up in channels and tactics, and obviously like right now we talk about geo or AEO or some kind of new way to sort of find answers on the internet, and it was previously SEO, and before that it was programmatic, and I think forever and as long as sort of marketing has existed, there's been like different ways and different paths for people to purchase your product. But like overall, I don't think like what buyers want has really changed. It's just like the mechanism, how they get to that final decision. And so I think from my perspective, like buyers are coming into the conversation much later, but they're coming in with much stronger opinions, right? And so your job as a brand in that particular instance is to show up in the right space at the right time. And there was actually this stat that was bouncing around a few years ago from LinkedIn. I'm assuming it's still fairly relevant, which is 95% of B2B buyers and like not in the market to purchase like what you're trying to sell, right? And so that means at any one point in time, there's only 5% people who are ready to buy your product or service. And so I think in this sort of the new AI era, what that really means is that you just have to be wherever they're at, right? And I think the consequence of that is what we're seeing, which is like this kind of AI slop, and there's sort of stuff everywhere because it's become really easy to produce marketing now. And so brands are everywhere, but because of that slop and the ability to produce marketing content is easier, it's this whole sea of sameness, right? And so there's no sort of differentiation or creativity. And so I think that's probably what helps you win in the future is like a little bit more thinking and a little less execution.
Okay, that's good.
Can I add to that though? Because I get what you're saying about products or brands developing content and kind of going out to market, but I think the winners in that scenario are any brand that already owns their own content or has their own subject matter expertise. So if you've been around, if you're a giant already in your organization, you would have, or in your industry, you would have come to market already and been able to kind of leverage your subject matter expertise with AI. So I do agree with you that if you're up and coming and you're leveraging AI to kind of position your brand, you're screwed. But if you use it correctly to protect your brand, protect your voice, and actually use your own content to distribute that, you can actually win, and it keeps the authenticity of the brand as well. So the buyer will naturally go to that person.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
I agree.
We talked about brand trust, and actually that's literally the conversation we had earlier today around brand trust. I just want to go slightly backwards though, if that's okay, and just pick up on what Cameron was saying. Obviously you're talking about making sure you're present and understanding where AI is part of that buying process. I guess the complexity comes from there's a lot of touch points and journeys are not linear. They're very all over the place. So I guess for me, it's like GEO, for example, that's a very specific use case of a particular part of that journey. How do you go beyond that? And how would you suggest that you actually identify those sort of critical, let's call them the moments that matter in that journey?
Yeah, I think I'll take an even further step back. I think as marketers, we're sort of addicted to this sort of idea of complexity and adding new tools and adding new channels. And I think that is just an example of that, right? Which is like, how do we know how to show up in GEO or AEO or on the right channels, like at any point in time? And I think historically marketers have been like, let's go buy a new tool, let's go try a new vendor, let's add a new tactic in. And I think it just adds to this sort of web of complexity. And we've got so caught up in that complexity that we've forgotten what the real basics of marketing should be, right? And so go and do some customer research. You can go and do that with AI now, but you absolutely have to double check it's like correct and accurate, right? Because there's a high chance of those models hallucinating. And so I think like we just have to go back to the fundamentals, more thinking, less execution, less shiny new tools, because I think we do that a lot.
Okay. And I guess similar sort of question to you, I guess, Lexie, but the added bonus question, as going through that sort of process to find those kind of areas that matter and going back and not getting fixated by shiny stuff, how do you demonstrate the value back to the organization?
I laugh at the shiny stuff and the web. I think when you're talking about going back to the basics of marketing, you have to be available to where the customer wants you to be, right? And so, yes, you do buy multiple platforms and do all of these things. I think that AI, on the other hand, has made it so that actually there's only really one place ultimately that the buyer is going to go to and the source to choose to buy stuff. Eventually, things won't matter. And I always make a reference to that scene in Minority Report where Tom Cruise is like running through the shopping center and you see all these aspects of AI calling out. It's funny, but it's actually like, hang on a second. You would be more inclined to do something if, one, it knew your preferences, it's talking to you when you want it to, in the moment that you're in. And I think that our issue with marketers overall is we're in too many places, hoping that someone's going to come and take the bait. And the bottom line is you just actually need to be in the right place at the right time. So I think that's my first comment about the shiny stuff. When it comes to the component around using AI and being able to position your brand correctly, which is, I think, was the question. I think that goes back to trust. And think of it in terms of Ferrari, Hermes, L'Occitane, all of the 150-year-old companies. What we don't see right now is them saying, hey, my new widget bag or my new widget car has AI attached to it, right? They've actually stayed very true to their product, first and foremost. Do they add implements of AI to the customer experience? Probably, but not in such a, what was the word you described it? Like a splash way or, just such an inconsiderate way. I think that you have to leverage it to match the brand and the buyer experience. And I think that that's what makes it really genuine. So I think that that's where companies are going to get it right and other companies are going to get eaten alive over time because they will be same overall and their product will just not be, it will reflect the same as their product.
Okay, that's interesting. I think on that note, the research that we have does show that 2/3 of B2B buyers say that all the brands they engage with sound the same in the category that they're looking at. Whereas conversely, marketers are saying they're doing a fantastic job and are actually making those wonderful experiences that kind of contradict that. I do wonder if AI does widen that gap slightly because if it's being trained on category content that isn't necessarily differentiated, like you've talked about some big brands, but often there's a lot of categories that brand consolidation happen. There's a lot of people, like AI, for example, or there's a lot of brands in that space, often using the same models behind the scene. So how do you become more distinctive and create differentiated in the marketplace, especially when marketers are plugging into those products and using AI to train what it says about their brand.
That is how they're using the brand. I hear so many people say, oh my goodness, I'm going to train AI. And then they just get on it and say, hey, how do I make like a PowerPoint? That's not how it works, right? And so you said plug my book. I will plug my book. So I just wrote a book about creating AI strategy. And I think the component that I wanted everyone to take away from it is you cannot go and get a device or a platform or whatever it is and just implement it. What you really need to do is go back to your voice of brand, the why component. Remember the whys when we were all in marketing in university. You have to go back to the very basics of why does your brand exist? Why would people buy from you? And all of those elements, that needs to be trained, the brand voice, the brand guidelines, you name it, into AI. It's at that point that you then take all of your existing content before AI existed, because that has all of the nuances, your subject matter expertise, as I said earlier, it has that authenticity piece, I think. That's what should be used to train AI. And then as you're going down the journey, you need a human in the middle of it. I laugh because you're right, marketers do think we're doing a great job. We think it's amazing because we've got these agents, but you still need to check the work, right? And have that human element attached to it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think for me, as a discipline, it might be a little bit controversial, but I think to your point, Lexie, is like you've got to go back to the start and get back to the fundamentals. And I think marketing as a discipline over the last 20 years, Lord help me, has got really, really lazy and sort of gone backwards, right? And I think with, you see it with the way we engage with these large language models, people won't even like think about prompting properly, right? You talked about, customers think that all these brands out there like look and feel the same, but then the marketers on the other side are saying we're doing an amazing job. And I think that's because they're sort of confusing activity with outcomes. And I think as marketers, we've sort of gone down this path for 20 years, right? Since like the internet boom sort of happened and we started creating roles like digital analytics and performance marketing and growth marketing, all these micro experimentation moments. And we started measuring likes and shares and like all these things that don't have like a tangible or easily connected outcome to like business performance. And so to your point, Jake, like I think even within that question, we're like personalization like isn't really differentiation, right? And it's like so easy to like personalize these days. I can go on Claude or ChatGPT and create 100 variants of an ad like in 2 minutes.
But is that personalization?
Exactly, it's not. But we're confusing that, right?
Yeah.
And we're not thinking about it. We're not like, what are we really trying to achieve? Who are our target customers? I don't know who my target customer is, so I'm just going to like ChatGPT it. And that is creating this kind of sea of sameness out there. Again, confusing activity with outcomes. And to your point, it's like go back to the beginning, start thinking like, what does your brand really stand for? How do we get really creative? How do we elevate the brand and really make a difference and stand out in this world where everything's the same? And so, again, go back to the fundamentals.
Yeah, I love that. I think the lazy marketing thing for me, I do actually agree with. The biggest thing that we see a lot of the time is when people do their sort of category thought leadership, and which is the output is because, as you said, like people just plug it into ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and the outcome is neither leading nor thoughtful as part of that process, and it all just starts to sound the same. And I think there's an inherent risk there because obviously to produce, like as an example, right? Again, B2B, the go-to is to produce a thought leader white paper.
I don't know why.
Okay. I don't know why.
Outcomes,
exactly.
It's like, let's use 30 pages to find something. Of course, that's what everybody does.
Correct. It's the go-to though. It's the go-to asset for a lot of businesses still. But even just doing that, the barrier to produce that now has lowered significantly, and it's become a lot faster and easier. Producing that sort of cheap content, it just creates noise. And again, going back on a full circle here is that noise does create sameness. So the question there is, if everybody can produce these things at scale, whether it is a white paper or a particular variation of an ad or whatever it might be, are we unintentionally using AI to actually reinforce that sameness instead of distinctiveness? So are people us the audience now being trained just to expect the same? And so when something very distinctive happens in market or very sort of outstanding appears, that's why you see the engagement rates accelerating, or you see better outcomes. So if marketing is easier to produce, I'll get to my question. If it is getting easier to produce, what becomes more scarce, and what do those strong brands do differently to create that distinction in their categories?
Can we start with the first part of what you said? Because I think
it's a loaded question.
No, but I love it because it's such a good comment. I think AI has just arrived for marketers as we know it, right? And I don't want to date ourselves, but I'm pretty sure the three of us can equally say we remember when a fax machine was involved in the process, right? Maybe I'm dating myself. I don't know.
No, I remember like some of these days.
Perfect. But my point is, I think that AI is a tool that has come in that people actually don't know how to use properly. Because when you think about it, now that AI is in the mix, probably 30% of the channels that we use to market right now should go. I'm going to say starting with the white paper, because the white paper has replaced actual, legitimate, intelligent research about stuff that can then be pulled and applied to your brand and then kind of spit out in terms of a promo or whatever it is. So I do think that because this new technology has arrived, you've got a bunch of marketers that are using it for just everything under the sun. And I think over time, these clicks and likes and all of this rubbish that we're qualifying our data sets for, we're going to realize, you know what, they're not even actually being used, right? Right now, I don't know if you're having this experience, but I'm hearing, and I think privately I'm experiencing, leads are like disappearing, right? You're paying all this money to Google. You've got SCM, as you've said, and geo and all of this stuff. And when it comes through, you're like, where are the leads? Because the money's going out the door, but people aren't actually clicking through the sponsored content, right? That's a good example. I'm not saying anything badly about Google because I don't know who else would be involved in this audience. But my point is that over time, those types of advertising will change. It has to. Will ChatGPT start having advertising on their platform? Imagine if that happened. You just wipe out so many more. So I just wanted to kind of start with that and say that's probably one thing, is that AI is being used completely wrong by a lot of our marketers. But back to your question.
I might jump in. I think like if like you're asking what's scarce, I think, you know, to your point, Lex, that we're sort of creating a lot of stuff that just isn't really moving the needle. You see it a lot in B2B with giant ebooks that are 30 pages. You see it a lot on Instagram for like B2C things, but you know, I don't know if you're the same as me, you get on Instagram and you can doom scroll for 2 hours. You don't really know what's happening. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, historically people have said that like attention is a scarcity. I don't know if I really believe it, because I think getting attention is like pretty easy these days. But I think like credibility is like a really scarce resource at the moment.
Excellent.
And so I think like with all this noise out there in B2B and also B2C and all these different pathways, I think like, yeah, credibility I think is the move forward. It's to your point earlier, which is like trust is paramount now, right? But it's so hard to generate trust when there's this sort of lazy thinking that's going on. And so I think that doesn't mean skip the creativity, right? We still need to generate attention, but it's like attention that matters, right? And I think that's really, really important.
Like good old-fashioned advertising.
Yeah, good.
Remember that?
Yeah. Sound like
actual things to make people look and remember a brand or moments. I think now we wait for the Super Bowl to see some really, really good advertising come out. But I don't think I've ever seen good advertising on LinkedIn or Instagram or any of those other channels. So I think it's a beautiful point that you've made about the attention versus the authenticity piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, and trust is an interesting one. I think, again, like just thinking back to the findings that we've got in the research, trust is the number one, globally, the number one driver or decision driver amongst B2B audiences is like, I feel safe signing a contract with someone, which is a degree of brand trust. But when we unpick that, we see there's lots of different sort of levers behind that, and they kind of ladder into sort of 3 broad buckets. And the first one is around being brand advocacy, and the second one is around brand relevance, and then the other one is actually brand reputation. And I do wonder sometimes, again, like with AI, because so much content is being produced and anybody can produce anything that may not necessarily be authentic, building like authentic trust with a brand is always going to be a challenge. And I think certainly with Thomson Reuters...
No challenge. We're 150 years old and we have trust principles. So yeah.
Correct. So it's again, but there's a lot of newer brands coming up. So how, for example, would you consider maybe leveraging the different components of like AI as a marketer to maybe accelerate that brand trust, or does it take 150 years to build?
It's governance. So I think you said you did something with ChatGPT when they first came out. Is that right?
So Invisible was one of the companies that trained their models. Yeah.
So TR, again, we're 150 years old. We're introduced, and I'm going to get the information wrong, so forgive me, but was part of this story of providing content to ChatGPT and Google to kind of get those elements out into market. So use of our content is truthful, right? We know that. Aside from our media side, where we have the most incredible journalists in the world who report on stories, we don't implement AI into that story making under any stretch of the imagination. I think the only thing we do, and we list it publicly, is that AI is potentially used for translation services if it comes off the back of LATAM languages. I think that's the only time we ever use it in that space. In terms of marketing, the level of governance we have of the programs we have, like platforms we have, the systems we use and the way that in which we use it is so strict. And we've got a lot of programs. That's why we have a system called Open Arena that has over, I think it's 60 different types of AI embedded platforms. But there are very strong directives around how we're allowed to use that. And I think that when you do have something come out to market, do we use it for content? Very rarely. And if we are, it's mostly to take something about a long thought leadership paper and turn it into something that can be used in different ways in different types of content. That kind of is a very guided principle that kind of gets it out, but it's very differentiated from the truth or the foundation of your company's brand versus the output. And a good example would be, I always use Hermès or anything, maybe I love the French, but I think of the French brands, right? Imagine Hermès using AI to generate any of their patterns or the styling that they do, right? They do the most beautiful things in the world, the scarves particularly. If they were to use AI to develop one of that, I think they would lose all of their customers because you think about the handcraftedness, you think about how old the company is and all of that authenticity. So I always want to say to people, no matter what you do with your AI implementation, you have to quarantine one aspect of your company's use versus what you do internally in operation. It has to be separated.
It's a great example. I think you also lose credibility.
Oh my goodness. Could you imagine? Not that I have an Hermès scarf. I'd love one, but I'm just saying, imagine.
Obviously, you've got a great experience with governance and thinking about how that plugs into the AI system.
Yeah, to Lexie's point, I think governance is really important. You talked about Hermès. Another sort of industry that's like immediately adjacent to that is the fashion industry. And like when like modeling agencies start using AI generated models, like that creates this huge furor, right? And like where everyone's like upset by like taking away jobs, and like that's a whole another question that we probably don't have time to get into today. But I think governance is important. I think the idea of brand reputation goes beyond, to your point, just like advertising, which is kind of a narrow definition of it. Like I think in B2B, it's like what's your brand reputation, right? It's like consistency over time, right? It's like the Hermès story. It's like the TR story is 150 years old, right? It takes a long time to build trust. And so when you get to that point and you have a story that resonates, you have to reinforce that story every single touch point. And so if they start generating patterns with AI, that's just sort of destroying that touch point, right? Taking a little bit of that brand story away. And so I think that's a B2C example. I think in B2B, it's like, you've done this great advertising, it's really differentiated, it's really creative, you've got like that attention, you've got that credibility. In many B2B like models, it's sales-led models still for like complex sales, and marketing will do this great campaign and it's really great. And you might get one of those like very in-demand leads, and then you can hand it over to sales. And if that handover isn't fast and efficient and consistent, and sales tells a different story, like you're going to lose those people straight away, because the access to information is so vast that if you fumble at any particular point, they're going to go straight to Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever they want, and they'll look up the number 2 option.
100%.
And if they're consistent, I guarantee they're going to get your money. And so it's like the whole buyer journey. And in B2B, that can sometimes be 12 months. That is so hard to get right over 12 months.
And it's shorter. Sorry to interrupt you, but it is shorter. I love that you pointed that out. People now, especially if it's B2C or B2B, want the product immediately. They want a freemium. You're seeing them everywhere. Everybody is offering freemiums. So if there are too many steps, that's probably another consideration is market. It's always on marketing, but if sales reduces the amount of steps, you get a faster closure rate as well. And people want to get to their product quickly.
I love it. I was going to say, I'm going to put a pin in process for a second. I do want to come back to the question that we shouldn't ask around jobs. I mean, just because it's a fun question.
It's not a fun question.
We might have different opinions on this. I don't know. Absolutely.
This is why I'm pushing the button.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talked a bit about lazy marketing and lazy marketers. Do we think that marketing roles are at risk at the end of the day? Short term, long term. That's my bold.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first on this one, Lex?
Sure.
Yeah, look, I think some of them are, right? I think we talk about like AI's ability to produce marketing at scale, right? And then you look at some particular roles where you might have channel specialists, some good examples like paid search or email marketers, particularly in larger markets like the US or whatever, where there's so much scale that you just point and shoot people at very specific things. I think like with AI's sort of ability to really run those sort of deterministic flows that are quite predictable, the ability to process information at scale and provide really deep analysis, I think those very specific sort of channel specialist type roles are probably going to either need to expand in scope, or they're probably just going to funnel down to the machine layer and to you were mentioning agents before. And I think relatively soon sort of agentic workflows are going to be able to handle most of those things. And so I think those roles over time will either disappear or have to change to be a much broader scope. And I think it was to my point earlier in the conversation, I think right now marketing is mostly 70% execution, 30% thinking. And I think we have to flip that, right? And I think AI allows us to think that. And so if we move some of that channel specialization, very discrete roles into the machine layer, that should enable us to hire generalists who can think across different channels and campaigns and who can own outcomes at that level. And so that, I think, creates, hopefully it takes us back to like the golden age of marketing, right? Which is like, now we're starting to think a little bit more. And so that's, I think that layer will change. I think overall that probably slightly reduces the amount of like marketers that are in market, but I do think it's going to elevate the thinking and the creativity, and we're going to get much better at like what we really should be doing every day.
I kind of agree. I do. I would say that all lazy marketers are at risk. First and foremost, if anybody is thinking, hey, I've got AI and this is fantastic and I can kind of just do a half-ass job, sorry that I've used that language on your channel, I think they're at risk, full stop. But I do think about the use of AI and how it can actually expand the way in which we market, right? So there used to be the good old days where you would advertise, you would sell your product, and you'd look after your customer. And I think at some point in the journey, you're seeing, particularly in the B2B space, the need to sell and get more pipeline and get more pipeline and pipeline, and then nobody's actually talking to the customer, right? So it's almost like you have a leaky bucket. So I think what should happen is over time, AI should evolve differently so that it does become more customer-centric, but it has to be done in alignment with a human, right? So I said earlier, I work with a team of 25 people on my team, of which 6 of them are agents, right? AI agents. They all work in conjunction with a team member. I personally work with 3 of them, right? The idea that it will replace me, I think, is a very difficult assumption, because you do need to have human oversight on a lot of things. But the complexity of AI today is not such that it will be able to kind of take over and run a department of people, right? You're right. It could do automated tasks. It could probably verify content or do the different steps that we want it to do. But can AI develop a campaign distinctly unique? And that's what we just started this conversation about, right? There's no uniqueness in any way, shape, or form. It's a vacuum cleaner, right? It does a function, that's it. So I think we need to kind of recognize that the AI that it is today, will it wipe up jobs? I don't think it will. I think it will expand. The AI of maybe 4 years from now, I think it's going to completely change the nature of the way in which we market and what marketing is as a profession as well.
Yeah. I might just add to that. I think Marketing as a discipline is, I think, even though it's arguably being one of the more transformed disciplines within like a business setting, right? I think because there's so much unpredictability in market, and you've got to respond to customers, you've got to respond to market trends, you've got to have that like really contextual understanding of what's going on. That's the kind of stuff that like AI isn't particularly great at right now. Maybe when AGI comes along, if it comes along, that'll be a different story. And I think that's still quite a ways away. But it's more the high level data processing and like really fast thinking for things that are very deterministic in nature. And so I think other disciplines will transform and like feel the brunt of this a little bit more. I think marketing's a little bit protected from that. But as it relates to the other disciplines, you've only got to look into Silicon Valley right now and you see the amount of like billion-dollar startups that have like 15 employees, 20 employees. And now that may be like a result of, inflated valuations of a brand new, really cool tech that the Bay Area loves and not so much focus on marketing. But I think there's a real trend there. Globally, particularly within tech anyway, that you can now build these enormous companies that can grow incredibly fast and have a lot of revenue with very little people.
Would you trust a company that had that? Would you buy from them, let's say, for a long-term product for your company? Like, let's say a tiny company, as you said, billion-dollar startup, says to you, hey, I want to help you with the digital transformation for your entire corporation.
Yep.
Would you trust them?
It would depend on a lot of other different things. I think that's where the credibility comes into it, right? If there's a company that has gone from 0 to $1 billion in 30 days, I'd probably want to wait a little bit longer to be using them, and I'll be carefully watching the market to see how they're sort of performing. I think with that explosion, and you see it in some of the lighter touch SaaS models, it's like when there's 1 billion, there's like 100 $1 billion companies with 20 employees, there's so many different choices, and it's really easy for you or me, Lexie, to go, I don't want to pay the $199 SaaS fee anymore for this company, I'll move to the other one. And so the stickiness of those companies certainly isn't there. But I think it's still a relevant trend to sort of keep an eye on. Maybe we'll come back in 2 or 3 years and see where they're at, but I think there'll be some that really survive it.
Okay. I mean, on that sort of note, what you're talking about is operating smaller sort of people teams at larger businesses. I guess that's kind of a nice segue into my actual next question, which is that it's not necessarily the technology we need to focus on. It's actually more about the teams and the process and the operation and organizational of that. Yeah. So in your view, what has to change in larger organizations that currently exist and how they think about workflows or decision making as part of that process to scale or continue to scale their organizations and still keep that quality, but not necessarily, increasing headcount?
Yeah, I think it's kind of related to what I said before, right? It's like move some of like the lower value or more repetitive work downstream and get more people doing QA and looking at the actual work and going, is this good? Is this actually going to meet the objectives that I really want this piece of work or this campaign to do? And I don't think we're doing that right now. And so I think we can move some of that value downstream and think a lot more. Then you're going to get high quality work. You're going to get much more time at the QA layer as well. And I think AI, to my earlier point about making people lazy, is that there's a real opportunity here for AI to save a lot of time. But what we end up doing is just spending that sort of saved time and like going back into the models to do more lazy marketing, right? I think as a discipline, what we really need to do is like take those hours that we've banked and like really use it to think about what we're trying to achieve, right? There's this model that people talk about, but it's like, it's the human in the loop thing, but it's essentially humans manage the inputs and humans manage the outputs, right? And so it's like 15, 70, 15, right? 15% of your time thinking at the start, make sure you're feeding the model all the right inputs and the objectives and the goals, and then 15% looking at the results of it, right? And we don't do that at the moment. I think it's more like 5%. In fact, 95% straight into the model, 5% think, let's ship it, that's good enough.
Okay. Lexie, obviously there's a keyword I picked up on there, which was the value. So again, what would you say is probably the first shift within a business to unlock that value? And where are people going wrong? Like, because again, I'm sure you guys both see it. Let's just throw AI at the problem. It's going to solve it.
I get that every day.
How do we get better outcomes, and how do we really extract value?
Extracting value from the use of AI. Look, I think you have to kind of work out, well, what's the objective? Why are you using it to begin with, right? And is it just to produce content? Is it just to get a lead? Is it just like some people just add the word AI to their product and then go, hey, we're selling this new thing and calling it AI as a product set. So I think a company has to have a clear, defined strategy on, okay, why are we using this technology? I think that's from the upper management side of things. Yeah. Once they have that decision, I think that's where the actual infrastructure of the team would change, right? So you go back to that example. If AI is being used purely for efficiency purposes, then yeah, you're going to get lazy, right? But if AI is used to have strong, amazing data analytics to understand how to keep your customer, how to improve your product, how to take feedback from your customer and implement it in real time, how to build better products, or how to kind of align with your company's values or ESG policies. I think that once the business has that, it then gives the kind of segue for the teams to go, great, I now know how to take that and put it into action and make the company what it's supposed to be or what it's meant to be. I think people forget that. AI is here to make everything better than what it is today. It's not to be replicating or doing something quickly or to get it out the door. It's to make something so extraordinary that over time, yeah, we'll have more time on our hands, but we'll actually be able to kind of then solve the real problems in the world, right? Rather than buying this widget or doing whatever, it's let's make free education, let's do this.
Bigger than marketing.
It's bigger than
Yeah, it really is.
ultimately, though, isn't that the biggest joke? Like marketing is everything. We're supposed to say it's a good day when it's not a good day, right? So I think that over time, if a company uses AI correctly with the right strategy, the right objectives, and then does the implementation align with their values themselves, that's the value.
So obviously, I don't want to get too tactical, but we still have to come back to the fact that AI is a broad term for lots of different pieces of technology. So when we're trying to extract value and finding these kind of moments that matter in a journey or whatever the use case is, what advice would you give in terms of actually identifying the best piece of technology to solve that problem? Because there's a lot of vendors out there, a lot of them all doing the same thing. And also, more importantly, going back to process, I mean, who else in the business do you take along on that journey? Obviously, you had the evil fingers going. So.
Yeah, I love it. I love my toys. So there's a difference. I want to make this clear to the audience. I'm looking at the camera. There's a difference between AI platforms and then actually having AI enhancements in your organization to kind of make things better, as I said earlier. So using AI to help with analytics is really important, I think. So you can use anything. You can set up your own AI agent, which I think is huge. I think every single marketer in the world should create their own AI agent to help them with better analytical output, because that's, I think, important. So that could be ChatGPT, that could be Gemini, that could be Cloud, that could be Llama, right? It depends on what level of data sets that you have. So that's probably in the data bucket. In terms of the customer unique selling point, making sure that it stands out to your customer, I like programs that are going to help with intent, right? So I'm a Bombora follower from the very beginning of Bombora implementation, but I do see things like Sixth Sense, which is a fantastic AI integrated system that helps kind of show the buyer intent from the moment of research to the moment of touch points with any aspect of your campaign. I think that that's a really good one because you can then kind of draw down the buyer journey and make it more bespoke, industry-led from a point of view. And I think that when you're thinking about having then the customer kind of in the funnel and they're having that overall experience, I think the content in which you give them has to be rich and engaging as always. So I'm not talking about having an AI implementation that just writes content, but have an AI implementation that does things like audio, that has, voice to text, that kind of creates an environment so that they can walk with your brand and be interacted with it. There are so many different options with that. You can go from Sora all the way to Nano Banana, which I think is the hottest thing right now. But Leonardo, I think, is a good one as well. I've seen that one recently. But it's the idea that you can create an ecosystem in which your customer is kind of part of the journey. So those are only some of the tools. But I think from an analytics point of view, to make you smarter in your decision making, ensuring that you have really rich and engaging content, and more importantly, really understanding what your buyer is going to buy and when. So you're not attacking them with umpteen million types of EDMs. It then gets the proper and perfect journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to add to that, it's really what you're trying to use AI for, right? So you just talked about Sixth Sense. That's like a product that's got a very specific use case. There are obviously a whole bunch of SaaS companies out there right now that are like building these sort of AI-led features. And so there's like AI within products, and then there's like AI for like business optimization and sort of reducing costs, right? And then there's obviously AI for growth, right? And so I think, to your point, like, how do you determine value? It's like, what are you actually using AI for? Because everyone is just like, to the point as well, like, what tools should we use? How do we make a decision? I think we've sort of just got into this mode of, I mentioned before, of like marketing's got really complex. We've got in this mode of just trying a million different things all at once. And because of the way sort of these like contracts work, you've got to sort of commit to something for 3, 6, 12 months at least. And you've got to stitch it into like a complex RevOps or technology system that has been built over 20, 30 years, right? And so I think the risk is that, yeah, like you just mentioned, like 20 odd sort of products. I think the risk is that there's like too many. And we're just going out and trying random ones without really thinking about what we're trying to achieve. And so that's just something to keep in mind. I think it also sort of is bringing rise to this kind of new kind of role. And we talked a little bit about it before, right? If we get rid of or sort of slim down the execution layer, we need this sort of QA systems layer that sits over the top. And, there are roles in the US for like go-to-market engineers at the moment where their job is to basically stitch the insights from these various different systems together, because that whole thing is a really complex webbing. And so I would just caution against like this sort of rapid fire trial sort of mode of operating we've got, because it creates so much inconsistency. And without like the QA and the governance that you talked about, I can type one thing into ChatGPT or Claude today and almost type the very similar thing tomorrow. It's going to be a completely different answer, right? And so I think like the short and the answer is like, work out what you're actually using it for. It's a great tool and it's very sexy and everyone wants to use AI right now, but it might not always be the best answer.
Can I just say something about that? Your Claude example is funny. No, if you're getting different answers from your agents over the 2 days, then you need to revise the prompt. But
Yep.
in terms of the multitude of products that are out there, because I just realized we both, like, I'm pretty pro AI and you're kind of like, I don't know.
Oh, I'm pro AI. I worked in it for a few years. I just think like it's like an operational thing that I
hear you.
And sort of I think the history of marketing over the last 20 years is like a cautionary tale of how we use it, right? Because we're likely to over rely on it.
I would just say, in terms of if your viewers were looking where to start, and I hear you, there's a lot of systems and you're getting stuck in those like trials in the years or whatever. Start with what you have. And I say that all the time. I think when you look at, if you're a Salesforce user, you can go into Salesforce apps and already see what's kind of implemented in that space. I think that that's really critical. If you're a Microsoft user, same principle. Teams is my favorite, because when you go into the app section, there are over 40, but here's the cool part. It actually integrates directly into your platform. So you're not going to pick up something that doesn't work. So if you were to pick up, let's say, a flow through to help you with the day-to-day task of answering emails or something like that, you could use something. Would you agree that like an automated element would be an okay use of AI?
Of course.
So it's not like a trendy thing to do. It's a very strong operational thing to do. I think that's one thing that you've raised, and I'm like, oh, that's a good point, is that there's the sexy, fun-looking AI tools that are not going to be sexy and fun months down the line because you won't actually use it. And then there's ones that you're like, wow, that actually helps me operationally. Power Automate is a good one as well. That can help you just make your life really, really easy, especially if you've got like 150 emails per hour, it can help you answer them.
Yeah, it's I might like that. It's a great point, Lexie, and the sort of sexy and cool tools is something to be aware of. But there's great value in that stuff as well. A sort of great example of that is like I've just recently joined my company, and over the Christmas break, my CEO decided that he wanted to sort of check out what vibe coding was, and in the space of a weekend, built an entire front end of a website. To which he came back to my team, and my team was like, that's amazing, but what about the back end? So the next weekend he went out and vibe coded an entire back end in CMS, right? And this is the CEO of a company, like quite a technical CEO. But he's gone out and just like, I want to really understand what this stuff is capable of. And he's built an entire website in basically 2.5, 3 days. I went to another vendor recently just as a backup plan, and they were like, it's going to be $60,000 right? And so sometimes this experimentation is like really, really helpful, but it's a really fine balance, because if you're not careful, you're just going to introduce complete chaos.
Okay. I mean, if I wanted to be sexy and trendy, I would not be working in B2B marketing. Sometimes feel, to be honest.
I'm offended, Jake.
We've all been doing it for a long time. I think, just to kind of close, so really one of the things I did pick up on is when you said like the advice for starting on your journey, I guess the kind of summarizing question for me is, if people are struggling with the AI work or what they're trying to do at the moment, what's the core capability they should invest in? And I say that capability very in a loaded way, because I appreciate AI is not necessarily going to be the shiny tool or platform, but what's the fundamental capability? Like, we've touched on a lot of things. Is it critical thinking? Is it investing in like more technical people, for example, who actually understand how to build a website in 3 days? Like, where would be the starting blocks be?
Anything that advances your business. So I go straight to, every organization in the world has way too much data and has no idea what to do with it. So the first thing you do is and that's why I referenced the history of AI in most organizations went to procurement. Because the first thing most corporations did was say, how come we're losing so much money? And then they implemented it, and we're able to kind of get rid of the vendors that they don't use or they're being overcharged. So I think that your first core capability, particularly if you're in marketing, go through your budget last year and look at where you spent the most money. For me, I looked at when it first came in, majority of my money was going into translation services, right? So there's 120 countries that are within the portfolio, and the amount of money we were paying. And I thought, okay, let me look for some really good, not AI translations that, come out saying the wrong thing, but something that's a little bit more complimentary. And wow, did that wipe off the first element? That got the CFO's attention, right? You're saving money. Wow, that's a new thing for marketing. Shock. And from there, you go through. I think that that's the key. What will make your budget go better or go farther? What will make your business perform better? And what will demonstrate your impact? I don't know if that's a specific capability, but I think as marketers right now, we are really struggling to demonstrate what value we add to any corporation, because some people forget where all the pipeline comes from for some reason. But I think if we really apply AI to those spaces, you automatically get a free road and more budget allocated in the right areas to get the proper outcome.
Yeah, look, I agree wholeheartedly. I think your first line of like anything that advances your business is probably where I would land as well. And, I just talked about the CEO vibe coding an entire website in a few days. I think along those lines, it's like, just get started, right? I think, there's a lot of research out there that says most marketers are using AI, but not a lot of them are like really comfortable saying AI did this. And so we have to change the culture to like make it okay to use AI. And to your point earlier in the conversation, it's not really about doing like things faster and cheaper. It's about like, what kind of work can we like give to the machine so that we can then start doing much better and much higher value work? And so, yeah, my advice would be just get started, right? Create a culture where it's okay to use AI and really encourage people to like experiment with it. Now, obviously that creates like a little bit of a tension where I said, don't really go too far and wide. But I think if you're in the early stages, you've just got to get people to realize what's possible. Because once you get in there and you realize what's possible, it's insane. Like your whole brain shifts and your mindset shifts. And instead of worrying about your job, you start going, wow, like what about all the amazing things I could start creating?
I love that. My last question is actually a bit of an interesting, fun one to Lexie. You said you have AI agents working for you. Do they have names?
They do. Did someone tell you that? Is that why?
No, I just genuinely.
It's fun to me.
Is it like lead gen Larry and like
No, like
reporting Rhonda?
So I'm a lover of Star Wars, and again, showing my age. So I have things like Data One Kenobi. I have the Brandalorian, Optimo. So, and that's the fun part, right? Is that you can create an agent and they actually use the words "this is the way" when it's talking about brand governance. If you know the Mandalorian, you know why that's funny. That went right over your head. But I think that having a name of your agent and back to your point about having people get involved in AI, it is 2026. If you do not have AI in your workflow, there's a problem. Like to some extent, if you're still trying to figure out where to start, there is a problem. And I would say that have AI on your phone. Period. Just get something on your phone. It doesn't even have to be in the office if you can't get the budget from your company. Just get it on your phone, because that comment about self-learning and developing, if you don't have that, you won't have a job. That's where you will lose your job, is if you're not using AI at all.
That's great. Genuinely, I've learned a hell of a lot from both of you, so thank you very much for your time. I think the key takeaway, not to oversimplify it, but for me, the key takeaway is genuinely that AI is making things a lot harder for marketers, but only if we let it, because you can find those process and production improvements. It's just about trying to find the right kind of use cases and then talking to the right people and bringing them on the journey with you. So thank you both very much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jake. Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for joining us. If you want to learn more from the Superpowers research, you can go to dentsu.com/Dentsu B2B/superpowers. There you'll find the report for you to download. And we look forward to seeing you next time.